bring you this discussion now. The Ethiopian government and Tigray forces have now agreed to a truce to end the 2-year-long war in that country. Among others, this peace deal will see humanitarian agencies expediting aid to those in the affected areas and the rebuilding of infrastructure destroyed during the conflict. The fighting has left thousands of people dead, millions more displaced. The two warring factions held peace talks led by the African Union right here in South Africa. So let's get you a sense of where we are now and, more importantly, what lies ahead. We're joined by Dr. Desta Meghoo, who is a columnist at the Capital Ethiopian newspaper. Dr. Meghoo, thanks very much indeed for coming onto our program this morning. I mean, it's a major breakthrough, most certainly, but it's not the first ceasefire in this conflict. In fact, the previous one was breached back in August, just a few months after it was agreed to.
Correct. And good morning from Addis Ababa. And again, we extend our great thanks to our brothers and sisters in South Africa that did help to facilitate this in terms of at least a venue and a safe space for the negotiations. I think in regards to your question or the concern of the previous cessation of military action, this is a comprehensive agreement that states not just, yes, we want cessation, but how, when, who, all the terms have been broken down, and not all the terms, because a lot obviously has to go into detail in Ethiopia, because this is an Ethiopian issue that has to be resolved internally now that this is set in place. However, at least there is a roadmap. There is an infrastructure that allows for the development of the way forward. And I think one thing I do have to set really straight, many times we're using terms interchangeably in the media. Of course, one of the parties is the federal government of Ethiopia, and the second party is the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And that is who the agreement is. It's not the Tigray people, and many times we make that distinction. However, it's also important to say that we're all Ethiopian. Tigrayans are part of the nation of Ethiopia, and I do believe that the cessation of fires and also some of the other items that are listed within the agreement, humanitarian aid, infrastructure, as you mentioned, government administration, political resolve, starts immediately. One of the distinctions in the agreement is to open up channels of communication with commanders on both sides within 5 days regarding disarmament and security. So again, there's a many distinguishing details between just straight cessation of arms, of fire.
Certainly. And as you point out to us, the importance of that distinction to say this agreement is between the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. At the same time, it's 90% of the people of northern Tigray that were affected by this 2-year conflict, right? They're now in need of food aid. A third of that region's children suffering from malnutrition.
Absolutely, undoubtedly. But let's be fair and honest. The Amhara region, the Afar region, although less reported by the mainstream media, has also been devastated. So I do believe that the comprehensive plan for, again, infrastructure, because many places were devastated outside of the Tigray region, will also be the focal point of this reconstruction. And I think also this is part of the restoration, if you will, between kith and kin, because again, we're all Ethiopians. So I think the building of trust through the processes of restoring the power, the telephone service, unfettered delivery of medical aid, food, etc., in all the regions will show that we're not just, again, as the media has really hyped the Tigray situation juxtaposed to the other regions. So I think providing equal services for all will certainly give a sense to all involved, because it's not just Tigrayans, again, that this is an Ethiopian issue and not a Tigray issue specifically.
As you say, it's a groundbreaking agreement that has been reached. But of course, the real work begins now, and you've started sort of pointing to what some of that work entails. It's around electricity, hospitals running out of drugs, banking and phone services being cut off, there is still an incredibly long road ahead, and the suffering of the people in that region will still continue for some time.
Absolutely. One thing I can say, I have never seen any head of state move as fast as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And so when I read carefully through, I put on my jury's hat and I'm going through the details and I'm saying 5 days for this, 7 days for that. And I have seen within the 2 years the speed at which this administration can move. And I think that speaks to the desire of the people for social cohesion again. Families have been ripped apart. You know, in the landscape of Ethiopia and all African countries, our ethnic groups are not isolated. We intermarry, you know, and so families again have been devastated. So there's the human side of this, the people's lives who have been lost and all the devastation and the psychological effects. So while there are political and other ways of approaching healing, the people of Ethiopia ourselves will have to be heavily involved while this, what's called the monitoring, verification and compliance component is going through, again, while high-level committees are doing their part, the people of Ethiopia, because this is why we are here with a peace agreement, by the way, which Emperor Haile Selassie says, what? Peace is a day-to-day problem, the product of a multitude of events and judgments. It's an ongoing process. But we have every confidence in the people of Ethiopia, and more importantly, or equally important, I should say, the people of the continent of Africa. Because we had to shift gears in terms of the strategies from 2 years ago when this campaign first began, from this is our thing, we can solve it ourselves, to realizing that this is a Pan-African issue. And with external forces, fingers and hands everywhere trying to meddle into the pot, it was only Africa. And again, I have to also identify the work of the Ethiopian diaspora, because they put a lot of pressure, particularly on the U.S. and European governments, in terms of stepping back from the pressure and the sanctions that were placed on Ethiopia.
Yeah, almost 2 years to the day, right? The 4th of November,
Absolutely,
2020.
2 years to the day.
Yeah.
And interestingly, yesterday was the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie. And so the signing happened. It became effective last night. And so I do believe, while we're not celebrating the deaths and the absolute tragedies that have ravaged the country and people's lives and livelihoods, but we are celebrating the fact that Africa has come together to say, silence the guns. And we did it within the Pan-African context, with the African Union guiding there in South Africa with our brothers and sisters. And so again, the government of South Africa and the people of Africa really have to be thanked. And Ethiopia's but important focus is going to be on engaging more the African continental diaspora and those within the 6th region, because really they stepped up.
Dr. Meghoo, I have to ask you this question around, much of the atrocities from both sides being blamed. I mean, there were atrocities from both sides, right, including ethnic cleansing and sexual violence, but some of the worst abuses have been blamed on Eritrean troops fighting alongside the government. And yet Eritrea was not part of these peace talks.
Well, there's two things. First, that term ethnic cleansing, I mean, it's probably a sexy term that we throw in, but that's not what happened here, okay? I'm not going to say that there was not ethnic conflict. I would be disingenuous to say that, but ethnic cleansing is a completely different level. Where Eritrea is concerned, Ethiopia is a sovereign nation, and this is one of the things that many people forget. We have agreements in place with various countries, neighboring countries, in the event of war and other travesties, to work together. So what was exercised was Ethiopia's right to bring in an ally. Not to mention that Eritrea was brought into this 2 years ago, when indeed the TPLF had shelled Eritrea. And all of this was part of their so-called preemptive strikes, even on the Northern Command, as you said, 2 years ago, that initiated all of this. But I think it's important for us to not necessarily focus on why. Because even the why, the shelling and so forth, there's so many underlying issues. And now that Ethiopia is putting something in place and recognizing that this requires deep attention and also has to involve other actors, now that TPLF, according to this agreement, will be, they're listed as a terrorist organization, that designation will be removed, which means now they will have an opportunity to come back into the fold while also allowing space for other Tigrayan parties that also want to vie for the administration of the region.
Dr. Desta, Meghoo, I have to thank you for your time this morning. We're out of time for our discussion, but thank you so much for giving us the context from your point of view on this groundbreaking agreement that has been signed between the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Ethiopian federal government. Dr. Meghoo, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We'll stay with